Hi, everybody. Welcome to Moving Markets. Today is May the 2nd, 2019. My name is Jeffry Dunyon. I am the owner of Safe Option Strategies. Go check us out at safeoptionstrategies.com. If you want to learn how to safely trade and navigate the U.S. markets, that is the way to do it. As I begin this presentation, it is about 10:45 Mountain Time, so that makes it about 12:45 on the East Coast. The major U.S. indexes are having a really, really rough day. Oil prices are down sharply. They're down sharply, I think, on Saudi Arabia agreeing to increase output to help offset the increased oil sanctions on Iran. When oil prices are going down, it's not uncommon for the markets to go down with them, but there's also some hangover taking place, some pretty major hangover from the sell-off that the market experienced in the last couple of hours. It was open yesterday, and that sell-off came largely on the comments that Fed Chair Jerome Powell made. Before I go too deep into this presentation, I have a little confession to make. This is the second time I'm doing this today. I just got done with about a 20-minute podcast, and I deleted it. Because for the last 5 minutes of the podcast, I went off on such a rant, and I got so worked up, and I was so upset over some things I saw on TV yesterday that at the risk of alienating and upsetting the majority of my audience, or at least a good part of my audience, I couldn't put it out there. I'll talk about it in a few minutes, but let's talk about what's driving things. Yesterday, if you're a regular to the program, you know that yesterday we did our presentation early in the morning before the markets opened. And when the markets opened and took off to the upside, everything looked like it was going to be good yesterday. Apple had their monster earnings beat on Tuesday afternoon. That was a much needed reprieve in the face of what Google did and how Google shares were down. And things were looking good. And then all of a sudden, Jerome Powell spoke, and he made a comment that just turned the markets upside down and turned them on their heads. And the comment he made was really pretty innocuous. It was pretty benign. And I want to explain a little bit, just briefly want to explain what he said and what the overreaction was to it, because that's what it really was yesterday. And if there's a little bit of a hangover from yesterday in terms of what's going on today, it's an overreaction, and I'll tell you why. The word that everyone seized upon in Jerome Powell's comments was transitory. Hang on one second. I got to type in something else. I'm typing in something else on my computer. I keep saying Jerome Powell, which is his name, Jerome Hayden Powell. But he goes by J Powell, and I keep forgetting that he goes by J Powell. And every time I say Jerome Powell, I'm fearful I'm calling him by the wrong name. Seriously, I just had one of those mental moments where I turned to my other computer here and typed in Fed Chair in the Google search just to make sure I wasn't calling him completely wrong. Okay, J Powell. I know he goes by J. I should just call him Powell and not say anything else. That would fix that. All right. So what he said is this. He was asked a question. First of all, he said, we're not going to lower rates anymore this year. At least that's not their plan right now. Now, I think Jay Powell wised up after his comments were a catalyst to the worst fourth quarter we've had since the Great Depression and the worst December we've had in the history of the U.S. stock markets. And that's what took place at the end of last year. January, February, and March, add April to that, we have more than recovered. The NASDAQ is at new all-time highs, the S&P at new all-time highs. Before yesterday and today's sell-off, the Dow got awfully close. If you took out the major hit that Boeing has had, the Dow would have exceeded new all-time highs along with the NASDAQ and the S&P. But the president in the last week or week and a half has commented a couple of times on the fact that he would like Jay Powell or like the Fed to lower interest rates. And Powell said it's not going to happen. And I'm okay with that. It wouldn't bother me if he lowered rates. It doesn't bother me that he's going to hold them steady. I think it would be a major mistake if they continued to raise rates. But eventually it's going to have to happen. Rates are still, interest rates in this country are still what I think are artificially low. I still think they're lower than what would be considered normalized rates. And I think they actually need to be a little bit higher, but I'm okay if they hold off for another little while. So I don't think that was the big earth-shaking news as far as the markets were concerned in terms of what Powell said. What I do think happened is he was asked a question about inflation. And we had some numbers earlier this week that suggested inflation is very much in check. We're hardly going up at all. In fact, we're going up far less than analysts were expecting. And it's not a concern. In the immediate future, it's not a concern. It's not a problem right now. It could become a problem. And Jay Powell made the comment that the low inflation rates right now are transitory, meaning it could change. Okay, think about that word transitory and think about it as it applies to pretty much anything else in the world, anything else in your life. If I said to you, hey, the weather's good now, but that could change, you'd say, yeah. It changes from time to time. We have some good weather and we have some bad weather. You could say housing prices are up. Right now, housing prices are really expensive, but that could change. And if I said that to you, you'd say, yeah, it could. If I said gasoline prices are really high right now, but that could change, you'd say, yeah. A few months ago, I could have said, wow, gas prices are really low right now. It's not going to last forever. They'll eventually go up. You would have shrugged and said, yeah, I hope they stay down for a while longer, but they will eventually go up. We all know that. Okay. None of that would bother you to the point that you would go out and do something irrational. Okay. If I said to, if I said to my family that lives in Idaho, shout out to my family in Idaho that I love. If I said to them, hey, gas prices are really low right now, but they might go up. Probably they're not going to go spend $10,000 and have a couple of huge gas storage tanks installed at their home and fill them to the brim with gas at $2.40 a gallon because gas prices might go up sometime in the next 6 months. That would be a major overreaction to a fairly innocuous comment about, hey, gas prices are low, but they could go up. And yet yesterday in the market, the people who we oftentimes think of as the experts, the mutual fund managers, the hedge fund managers, the big brokers, the big banks. These are the people that we think are experts. These are the people that we sometimes think when it comes to matters of money and when it comes to stocks and when it comes to trading, we sometimes think of these as the people that are smart, the people that are, and we oftentimes let ourselves slip into this idea that they're smarter than us. And when Jerome Powell said, yeah, inflation is really low, but that could be transitory, they freaked out. They panicked. They sold off. They started dumping shares of everything. It was the Chicken Little reaction. What did Jay Powell just say? He said inflation is transitory? Oh my gosh, the end of the world is probably tomorrow. We better take everything out of the market and go into cash because if not, we'll lose everything we have. Now I'm exaggerating big time. You probably couldn't figure that out, but that's kind of what the reaction was. The markets, all the indexes were up, and all of a sudden, in a matter of a couple of minutes after Powell saying inflation rates were transitory, everything flipped on its head. Do you know how ridiculous and stupid that is? The lesson I took from yesterday is that these so-called experts, they don't know anything more than you and I, and oftentimes they have more of a herd mentality than you and I have. Because one big broker, one big bank says, "Oh, I don't like those comments from Powell. We better, go to some cash and liquidate some of our positions." And the rest of them, what are they doing over there at JP Morgan? They're selling because Powell said the word transitory. We better sell. Over here at Morgan Stanley, we better sell. Powell said transitory, and Goldman and JP Morgan are selling. We better sell. Are you kidding me? Are you really kidding me? You want to talk about a knee-jerk overreaction? We saw it yesterday in a way that we've seen it too much over the last few years. I hate to say it's the new normal. I don't want to call it the new normal because let's be honest, we've had a few months in a row where things have been shaken temporarily and for short periods of time, same things, temporarily and for not a very big distance in the market over small things, but I haven't seen a massive overreaction. I think fourth quarter of last year and December specifically were an overreaction, but we recovered nicely from that. I think yesterday and today are going to be more like a couple weeks ago where we slid a little bit and then quickly recovered from that. But it never ceases to amaze me that the people we sometimes think of as the smarter people are doing some of the dumbest things. Selling off yesterday, selling off today, and getting caught up in this frenzy, dumb. It just straight up dumb. Nothing has changed fundamentally in our economy. Unemployment is still really low. Inflation is still low. Interest rates are still really low. Wages are increasing. Earnings are increasing for companies. Corporate America is doing good. People are making more money. Everything going on in our economy right now is good. We had numbers come in yesterday or the day before on new payrolls, new jobs created. It was a blowout number. It crushed what analysts thought it was going to say. Then we had a report yesterday that construction spending was down a little. New construction spending was down a little bit. Do you know why? Because home prices are a little bit overinflated right now. Guess what? Those things will balance out. New home prices are going to come down a little bit and construction spending is going to go up a little bit. And when new home prices start creeping back up a little bit, construction spending is going to go down. It's kind of like this equilibrium that just sort of goes like this, but nothing like this. I mean, it wasn't this big skewed, crazy, wild, over the top, good number or bad number. It was down a little bit. Construction spending down, new home prices up a little bit. Okay, that's not the end of the world. That's not a reason for Chicken Little to run around and say the sky is falling. Right now, as we speak, the Dow is down about 195 points. A lot of that is on the backs of Chevron and ExxonMobil, a couple of the bigger Dow components that are energy stocks. I think it'll be temporary. I think by this time next week, we'll be back up. We will have more than recovered what was lost yesterday and today. I am going to shift gears politically a little bit. I'm not going to go on the rant that I had to erase and start over on, but I am going to say, I'm going to say something to my Democrat and my liberal friends. And I'm going to say this with all sincerity. I don't want there to be any hard feelings to any of my liberal friends or any of my Democrat friends, but your representatives in Washington, D.C. right now are embarrassing you. If you cannot, through emails and phone calls and at the ballot box, if you cannot get your elected representatives to close the door and move on past the Mueller investigation, what you're going to do is absolutely guarantee a second term for Donald Trump. No Democrat in Washington, D.C. right now, or at least none that I'm aware of, are focusing on solving problems. In spite of how good our economy is doing, we have some problems in this country. We have a problem with immigration. We have a problem at our southern border. We have a problem with out of control government spending. Our deficit and our debt are reaching cataclysmic levels. It's got to be fixed. It's got to be addressed. I'm embarrassed that Republicans are not demanding more gets done about the deficit and the debt. That is embarrassing to me as a conservative, that my representatives are not doing more and fighting more ferociously on my behalf to control spending and to control the deficit and the debt. We've got, like I said, we've got the immigration problems. We've got the border problems. We've got infrastructure problems that need to be addressed. And I'm sorry, the answer is not a $2 trillion price tag where Trump just pulled a classic George Bush Jr. move. When George Bush signed legislation with Ted Kennedy on education, it's like he wrote the Democrats a blank check for education. It was absolutely one of the worst things. I think George Bush was confronted with some problems that no other president had to face in the wake of 9/11 and Iraq and Afghanistan. I think very few presidents in the history of this country have had to deal with that type of a situation like he had to deal with. I think he did a lot of good things, but the man was a blank check. He gave the Democrats everything they wanted in terms of spending, and then it just tripled and quadrupled, and it was exacerbated tenfold under Obama. Trump gave the appearance that he was going to do something different, but boy, with that meeting yesterday with Pelosi and Schumer and this agreement, explain to me how education should be involved in an infrastructure bill. That is a capitulation to the Democrats that was just absolutely foolish and asinine on the part of Donald Trump. And I hope he reverses that in a big way. He's got to reverse that. But going back to the issue with the way the Senate committee grilled Bill Barr yesterday, the Attorney General, with the House having a tizzy fit over him not showing up for another public scolding today. Democrats, listen close. I'm one small voice, and I'm a pretty unimportant voice in the big scheme of things. But if you want to absolutely 100% guarantee Donald Trump a second term, keep doing what you're doing. Have your representatives keep going after him. For those handful of you loony, crazy nut job Dems who are still convinced that you want to impeach this president, knock yourselves out. For those of you that are more rational, and I think it's the majority of Democrats that are a little more rational, for those of you that are more rational and can step back away from the emotional things you hate about Donald Trump and be a little bit logical, you better get your representatives to start legislating and stop witch hunting and stop going after, Mueller went from being your hero to being a big scapegoat. And you don't really want to make Mueller a scapegoat as much as you want to make it Attorney General Barr now. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. It'd be the best thing in the world for Republicans that want to see Trump get a second term. If you want any one of your candidates to even have a microscopic chance of beating him in a year and a half, you better back off this idiocy and this lunacy of going after everyone associated with him and trying to find a crime to fit what you've already determined is a guilty verdict. You already think the man is guilty of everything, but you got to find the crime to make him guilty. It's ridiculous. It's moronic. Nancy Pelosi's comments about Attorney General Barr, get over it. Turn the page. Move on. It's a dead issue. It's not a winning issue for you. I promise you. I got to talk a little bit about Venezuela. Before I wrap up, I got to talk a little bit about Venezuela. It's a mess down there right now. And it's a mess because socialism never works. It never has. It never will. There is no version of socialism that ends well for the people. It works for a period of time for the people at the top and the people in power. It never works for the little people. It never works for the average everyday person. When I hear people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when I hear them use the word democratic socialism, that is one of the biggest lies being perpetrated on the American public right now. That is one of the most deceitful ways of trying to grab your money of anything I have ever heard in my life. You don't dress up the word socialism. Don't put a dress on the pig that is socialism and try and pass it off for Cinderella at the ball. It doesn't work. Okay. Socialism never has worked. It never will work. And it's insulting. And it ought to be insulting to you people that follow them. If you're a Bernie fan, if you're an Elizabeth Warren fan, an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez fan, it ought to insult you when they say democratic socialism. some lady in a town hall who is from one of the Eastern Bloc countries, the Soviet Union or somewhere. She asked Bernie Sanders a question about why would he be in favor of the same kind of policies that basically caused her and her family to flee their country. And that lying cheap sack of crap, that wolf in sheep's clothing, he spun it and he twisted it and he turned it and deflected it and said, if you somehow think that I'm in favor of the dictatorship, if you somehow think that I'm in favor of the dictatorship that existed the Soviet Union, then you're absolutely wrong. And I've never been in favor of that. What a liar. What a flat out liar. The man is on film talking about his support for Fidel Castro, talking about his support for Che Guevara, talking about his support for Hugo Chavez. He's on tape supporting that kind of a system. And he blatantly flat out lied to this young woman about his intentions of wanting socialism in this country. Don't buy his crap for 1 second. The people of Venezuela are suffering because they have lived under Hugo Chavez and then Maduro, and they're fighting back. And they're fighting back with one hand tied behind their back because back in 2012, Venezuela confiscated all their guns. They don't even have the ability to fight a fair fight. They're only going to win in sheer numbers and if more countries than the United States come to the aid of Venezuela. And I'm urging our politicians to put all their partisan bickering apart and go help Venezuela. Get Russia and get China and Cuba the hell out of there and get our troops down there to help the people of Venezuela. It is the right thing to do. It is what we need to do. Representative Ilhan Omar, the anti-American idiot from Minnesota, made some comment about how President Trump and sanctions on the government and their oil down there is the reason that the people are suffering. No, that is absolutely incorrect. When we put sanctions on their oil production, when we put sanctions on their economy, it is only hurting the politicians at the top. And then they in turn try to make things more miserable for the people. In a socialist setup, in a socialist government, the people already suffer because the government controls everything and imposes its will. That doesn't happen through sanctions. Sanctions cripples the government and weakens it and allows the people to rise up. Omar was absolutely wrong. She is an absolute moron. The fact that she's in Washington, D.C. representing any district anywhere in this country is a sad, sad statement for our country. It has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with her being anti-American. If she hears my podcast and if she tries to make it about her being a woman, if she tries to make it about her being Somali, if she tries to make it about her religion, she is lying to you. It is not about any of that. It is about her being an anti-Semite and an anti-American. And people in Minnesota, you voted for an anti-American. If that's the way you really feel, pack your shit and get out of America. If you're anti-American, get the hell out. No one is keeping you here if you're anti-American. Get out. We don't want you here if you're anti-American. Simple as that. I don't care if you're white. I don't care if you're black. I don't care if you're Hispanic. I don't care if you're Asian. I don't care if you're Somali. I don't care if you're Jewish. I don't care if you're Christian. I don't care if you're Muslim. I don't care if you're Hare Krishna. I don't care. I'm not racist. I'm not bigoted towards any of that thing. What I am is passionate about. If you don't like this country, get the hell out. I'll buy you a one-way ticket to a country of your choice if you promise you'll never return under any circumstances. All right. I almost went over the edge the way I did on the presentation I had to delete. I'm going to stop right there before I go too far. If you like what I'm doing, keep listening and tell everybody about it. If you don't, get the hell off my program. There you go. That's it. That's a wrap.